and much appreciated that this hangout is on air and it is live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. It is the Audible Live Thursday night extravaganza. We've got the coordinary back in action on this evening's show. I am Cecil Lammy, joined by Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Dr. Gene Bramall, as we discuss news and notes around the National Football League and also what's going on in tonight's game. But first and foremost, it's been a while since all four of us have been together. Matt, I didn't know if you'd recognize me with my fluffy beard.
Yeah, I know. I'm telling you, I was a little unsure. I think Bloom mistook you for Tony Sperano a little bit earlier.
It's the chain, man. You got to have the chain going on. Bloom, I know you got your chain on.
I do still have that little chain there. I was so excited for this reunion that I actually showered and put on a shirt with a collar. These guys got so excited the last time I put on a shirt with a collar that I had to do it again for them, because that's what friends are for.
Exactly. Keep smiling and just keep swimming with Dr. Gene Bramall, who's all bundled up.
Yeah, I'm playing the role of Bloom today, cover myself up because I haven't gotten cleaned up in days.
Yeah. Well, fellas, on tonight's program, we're going to go through this Raiders-Chiefs game that's going on right now. Latavius Murray, Bloom, what's the latest that we have on there? And then obviously we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Latavius before we jump in with Dr. Gene and the injury situation.
Yeah, Murray had a nice touchdown run. They still started out with a lot of Darren McFadden, and then we saw Murray. It wasn't the most graceful cut outside, but it was almost like a Fred Flintstone kind of get the car going, but he to get outside and get an untouched touchdown. And then he actually had you did see the measurables on his explosive cut into and through the hole on his 90-yard touchdown run. And then on the next drive, Kurt Holman, helmet to helmet, I think it was Will Carroll, the injury expert, tweeting out that you could see from his eyes that Murray was unconscious. So I don't think we're going to see Murray again. But they do get 10 days to recover. Murray does for the Week 13 game, so you hope to see him back out there. And I think the cat's out of the bag, so to speak.
Right.
And if you did play Murray on a whim, because we're all scraping the bottom of the barrel on some teams at running back. You got your 2 touchdowns. You got over 100 yards. Chiefs hadn't given up a rushing touchdown all year. Marshawn Lynch didn't score against them, and Murray does that. So it just goes to show how difficult it is. And also we get to the assumption of rational coaching. Because I have to admit, when I was asked about Murray, we mentioned him on the waiver wire show in the interest of due diligence, but Raiders offense, and you have Murray not getting on the field ahead of MJD and McFadden, thinking, well, what is there really going to be there? But the rational coaching was irrational, as obviously Murray had a lot more to bring to the table than they did. It just took a while here. So that's the biggest fantasy story here, but it's one that it was nipped in the bud tonight.
Yeah, nipped in the bud a little bit. Dr. Gene, any thoughts here before we get to your injury segment to begin the show, but any thoughts on Murray and what you saw after that hit?
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear that he was out as he was going down, fumbled the ball, didn't have control of the ball anymore, was a little bit, almost looked to be out on his feet as he was getting up there. It's no surprise that he's not back on the field for the second half, and as Sig says, he's going to have a few extra days to recover, and we've seen Oakland, and it's prior coaching staffs, but Oakland in general with their medical staff being a little bit more aggressive than some others as far as advancing guys through the protocol. So as long as Murray isn't having symptoms through the weekend, I wouldn't expect him to miss much time. We'll know more about that next week, though.
Matt, you're up next, and your thoughts on Latavius Murray. He's a player that down in Allen, Texas, me and Bloom and the likes of Dane Brugler all got to see Latavius Murray at that game. And for me, he always reminded me, because of his size-speed combination, the upright running style, Matt, he reminded me of CU's Chris Brown. And, as a former Titans fan, you could say, hey, Chris Brown, there was something there. With so many injuries, it was difficult for him ever to produce for a long, long time. But there was something there with a guy like Chris Brown when he came out of CU. Latavius Murray always reminded me of that, swift, powerful, and that gait. Usually I don't like long striders at running back, Matt, because you just, hit their ankles together and they trip up because they've got that really long stride. But you can see with a back like Murray how it can eat up those chunks of yards quickly. So as Bloom highlighted, not the greatest foot frequency in terms of bouncing things outside, but once he gets that steam train rolling, man alive can hit roll. So your thoughts in the rookie scouting portfolio and the draft lens from Latavius Murray, Matt?
Well, to give the quote unquote, other side response to the Murray question of tonight, I agree with Bloom though in one sense. If you started him tonight, you got lucky. And it's not to say that Latavius Murray is a bad prospect or a bad player. He certainly is good enough. But when you watch that play again, what you'll notice is that the Chiefs played a 9-man front. They had 5 on the left side and they had 4 on the right side. And the linebacker, Malga, overran the hole to the extent that he wasn't square to the hole when Murray cut through, and at that point he was gone. It was a nice cut. It was good vision, but it was a type of play that once you beat that one man because of the way it was blocked up, that's it. So the only thing that would have had to have happened is that he would have gotten caught from behind, and he, to his credit, he's athletically talented enough to be able to get the job done there. Murray as a draft pick to me was one of the most awkward-looking effective runners that I've ever seen. He has a very herky-jerky Kevin Smith type of gait to him in a lot of regards, which is similar to the fact that he was also a UCF player and I believe a former receiver or tight end before he became a running back. So he's a good receiver out of the backfield. He just had a very unusual way of moving. There was a lot of movement going on as he was taking steps. Kind of like a Tin Man that had some loose nuts and bolts on all the joints as he was running through, running in a straight line. Everything else was moving along with him in different directions, which can be very, very difficult to, kind of track a guy on the one hand, but it also can be, kind of wasted movement on the other. So, he's a good prospect. He's worthwhile considering. He certainly has, made the transition. The team has liked him, but as Bloom alluded to, Tony Sperano has been saying for the past few weeks, we'd like to see Vincent Brown more on the field. We'd like to get Kenbrell Tompkins more on the field. And they do, and those guys get like 2 or 3 targets and 1 catch or whatever it is, and you would have figured the same thing when they say, we'd like to get Latavius Murray more on the field. Well, now we know, and as long as those question marks in his eyes kind of clear into we actually see pupils after that hit that he took, I think we'll all say that he's someone that we're going to think about a lot more in the coming weeks.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night, of course, brought to you by FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Make sure you sign up today for 1-week fantasy football leagues for cash prizes, baby. FanDuel.com giving away over $10 million weekly in cash prizes, $170 million given away over the course of the season, and you want a piece of that action. You're a hardcore fantasy footballer and you haven't checked out FanDuel.com? Well, make sure you sign up today. FanDuel.com, where every week is a new season. That's FanDuel.com. To the injury news we go. That's like to the Batcave we go. To Dr. Gene Bramall, who is very much like Batman. And we have to talk about the latest news and notes for the injuries. As a Gio Bernard owner, as a guy who maneuvered and probably overpaid in a way for Jeremy Hill in my hybrid dynasty league, because I was so concerned about Gio Bernard. Now I've got them both active, but I look at this Gio situation and practicing today. You like what you're hearing out of Cincinnati, but Dr. Gene, I don't feel good about it until I talk to you. So let's kick things off there. Dr. Gene Bramall on Twitter, @GeneBramall, and let's kick off the injury segment of the show. Gio Bernard, first and foremost, he's out there on the practice field. What's your thoughts? What's your expectations? What do you think about Gio Bernard here, Dr. Gene?
I think he's going to play this weekend. I think we saw him pretty aggressively recondition last week in the same way that we saw A.J. Green return a few weeks ago. Recondition on the side, come back and take a limited practice earlier in the week, and then start to increase his practice participation. The fact that he's practicing fully today, unless there's some unknown setback that occurs and his hip doesn't respond well tomorrow on Friday, then I think we're going to see him fully practice, and he'll probably be listed probable, if I had to guess. Whether that means he's going to take his pre-injury workload is another issue entirely. Hugh Jackson wouldn't name a starting running back, wouldn't name his foundation running back on Wednesday, and I don't expect him to do that on Friday either. With as well as Jeremy Hill is running, I think this may finally be one situation where we do see the Bengals do a little bit closer to a 50-50 split. I don't think they're going to marginalize Gio Bernard at all. I don't think that Jeremy Hill is that much better of a running back, if he is at all. So the question becomes, are they going to be able to get 30 touches, 30 carries against Houston? If they are, then both of these guys are probably going to get 12 to 15 carries and at least that in touches. But there's going to be some concern. I think you're going to see the Bengals likely rely on Hill first unless Bernard looks good in his first series or two out there, and then it might be closer to a 50-50 split. So I wouldn't be too worried about using Hill this weekend. I'd be a little bit more reluctant about using Bernard as more than a flex, simply until we know exactly what Hugh Jackson and Marvin Lewis are planning to do with these guys as they work Bernard back from his injury.
Gene, Arian Foster, hazard a guess, and I am emphasizing guess, whether we'll see him on Sunday, and what you think the likelihood, if we do see him, of a split, some sort of modified approach to how they split up the backfield between he and Alfred Blue, as opposed to Foster being the starter and Blue getting change of pace. And what I'm most curious about is, based on what we know about his practice participation and how far along he is, what can we extrapolate or infer about how severe his groin injury is?
Well, I think the groin injury has been a mid-grade groin injury from the beginning. We've seen maybe a little bit less optimism than was expected in the beginning, where folks were worried would he be out 4 to 8 weeks, and then through the bye week there was less concern, and well, maybe he'll be back as soon as last week. This was always kind of a 3 to 4 week injury. We're in that range now, at least I think. Could it be something that stretches 4 to 6? Yeah, that's possible. I don't think Thursday's lack of practice is a good sign at all, though. No, when Bill O'Brien says that it's unlikely that Arian Foster had a setback, I think that's probably accurate, but I think probably what's happened is Foster tested it out on Wednesday, realized that he's not close enough to get ready to go and be a big part of the game plan, and shut it down today. Now, I'll be willing to change my mind on that if he's back on the practice field tomorrow in any capacity. That makes him a little bit better chance of being on the probable side of a game time decision, but I think when they shut him down in practice on Thursday, call him a game time decision at best. That's just their way of leaving their option open as long as possible. But, unlike a player, maybe like a Marshawn Lynch, who doesn't practice Wednesday, doesn't practice Thursday, that doesn't tell us for certain that he's not still within the game plan and ready to take some practice on Friday and ready to go. But a guy like Foster, who's been out multiple weeks already, who gets back to practice on Wednesday and looks promising, and then doesn't take any reps on Thursday, which is the primary practice day of the week, tells me that they don't think he's got a good chance of playing this weekend.
Well, Gene, I never saw the movie Alien versus Predator, but I have a feeling that on Sunday we might be seeing it, and I want to see who's going to win here. We have on one side the Predator, Larry Fitzgerald, and then on the other side we have the alien, Richard Sherman. So I'm just wondering whether or not the Predator is in good enough shape with that MCL sprain to actually have a showing here against the alien.
Yeah, I don't think the Predator's even going to show up for the fight, if I had to guess. There was optimism on Monday that that Fitzgerald said he was going to play, and that the Cardinal coaching staff said that he had a good chance to play, but that's on Monday. I think it's if they're coming out and saying that it's a grade 2 injury, we know that there's some significant tearing of those muscle fibers, and by definition, a grade 2 sprain means that there's some looseness in the knee joint, and that is not something that's going to get better in 7 days. Is it something that Fitzgerald could brace himself up and try to play through? The answer to that is probably yes, but it's not going to be effective by doing so. A brace is not going to prevent any further injury. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put him out on the field and risk a worse grade 2 injury or a full tear that would cost him 4 to 6 weeks, knowing what they've already gone through from an injury perspective with Drew Stanton replacing Carson Palmer and some of the issues they've had on the defensive side of the ball, all the guys they've lost there. I just don't think it makes much sense to put him out on the practice field. Now, so I guess I'll couch this in the same way that we talked about Tony Romo and his back injury. If there was a wide receiver that you might expect to try to play through this and have a chance to play effectively, you might put him alongside Brandon Marshall, Roddy White, and put Larry Fitzgerald right at the top of that list. So I don't think it's fair to rule him out already. We knew he wasn't going to practice on Wednesday. It's not a surprise he wasn't practicing on Thursday, but it's really hard to see a wide receiver plant, cut, dip, and get in and out of these route breaks that he would need to get into, even with a brace with a grade 2 injury. I just don't think it's something they're going to risk.
Has there been anything that could have been a greater combination that was so disappointing? I mean, imagine if Reese's Peanut Butter Cups sucked. Like chocolate and peanut butter, awesome. Aliens and Predator, awesome. Or maybe not. So Matt, don't worry about Netflix.
It's like Godzilla versus King Kong. It was the same thing 50 years before that, I think.
Exactly. The Audible Live continues on. Dr. Gene Bramall in the injury segment here. Let's make it a Broncos show, Dr. Gene, and talk about Emmanuel Sanders, but in kind of a larger picture from Emmanuel Sanders as well. I want your thoughts on the concussion protocol. Now that we're in Week 12, fantasy owners and football fans are fairly used to how the concussion protocol works now in the NFL. So your thoughts on how you've seen it work this year. Are there any tweaks or advancements or changes that you would make in the concussion protocol, Dr. Gene? And then on the Emmanuel Sanders tip, at a charity event, Women, Wine, and Football, that was on Monday, and he was fine. Joking around with us media types in the Broncos locker room this week, even though he can't officially be interviewed. But, looking like his normal self. He still has to be cleared from an independent doctor. But chances are looking good that we could see Emmanuel Sanders this week. So your thoughts on Sanders, what you've heard about his availability this week, and also just the concussion protocol in general, Dr. Gene. Do you like what you've seen as the NFL obviously taking this much more seriously than in years past?
Yeah, and I don't think there have been any major changes to the concussion protocol. Every team is doing things a little bit differently, and they're doing things differently than what we would probably do in the field with some of the younger players, just because they have, that much more availability to their guys. They can observe them in the morning, afternoon, and in the evening as often as they need to, and maybe advance them a little bit more quickly than we would feel comfortable doing when we only get a chance to see the younger kids, maybe an hour or so out of the day. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Some teams do things a little bit differently. I don't think we've identified a situation yet this year like we did last year where guys got hurt on Monday night or on Sunday night and we're still playing on Thursday. I haven't seen that happen. I think there were a few situations, Jake Locker, Antonio Brown, where, just from a television perspective, you had to be worried about a concussion, and those players were taken back for an evaluation and cleared to come back when, you just wonder maybe there was enough on video to say, if you're going to go by the when in doubt, hold them out first step to the evaluation process, maybe some of those guys looked a little bit more in doubt on TV than maybe they did in the locker room when they went back there. But that's difficult. I mean, that's me sitting here in this chair without getting a chance to hear how they're feeling and do any of the exam. But I haven't seen anything that seems out of the ordinary as far as, I'm surprised that guy was cleared to come back. If anything, we're seeing guys like Jordan Cameron teams take some more time with them, and even Delaney Walker, who was back to a full practice last Saturday and looked maybe in line to get cleared by the independent neurologist and then wasn't. From a precautionary standpoint, I think teams have done a little bit better job with the protocol this year, making sure guys are returning to play. I don't think we know where Emmanuel Sanders is in the protocol, but the fact that he was cleared to go to a charity event on Monday, the fact that he's been allowed to stretch with the team on Wednesday and Thursday means that he's not having any symptoms right now. It also means that he's not been cleared for contact yet, but that often does not happen until Friday afternoon or Friday morning. Teams get out and practice on Friday morning. If their doctors are comfortable with him being cleared for a full contact practice, that's okay, but they do need the okay by the independent neurologist in order for him to be cleared for game action, and that usually happens on Friday afternoon. We've seen some teams wait until Saturday to have that done, but assuming that Emmanuel Sanders doesn't have any lingering small symptoms going on, and again, I don't think that would be the case based on what we've seen with how Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now Thursday have gone. I think there's a very good chance that we'll see him be sent to the independent neurologist tomorrow, and when teams do that, they fully expect that their players are going to be cleared. It doesn't make any sense for them to send him for an independent exam if they think it's close, because if it's close, those guys aren't going to be cleared. So we'll have a good sense tomorrow, practice participation or not. Hopefully he's back to practice in some fashion. He's allowed to take interviews in the locker room, and we're told on Saturday that he's cleared and ready to go, and we won't have to worry about it on Sunday at all.
Gene, a lot of attention on Josh Gordon, and I'm sure we'll drill down on some of the other elements of this picture, but the medical element is one. Now, yesterday, I got Tony Sperron on the brain. Mike Pettin saying that we've done some research on injury rates after long layoffs, and maybe hinting that they weren't going to play Gordon as much. Now today saying, oh, he's ahead of maybe a little ahead of where we expected. Does this stuff pass the sniff test for you, or is it more likely trying to throw off, that they're excited about Josh Gordon? I mean, what does this make you think when you see a coach just volunteering information like this?
I tend to not pay too much attention to those sorts of things if it's more of a generic situation. The guys in the past have had trouble coming back, but we've seen Gordon now and he looks okay. I don't know. I mean, is there a chance that they're going to limit his reps? I think there's a chance that happens. How many reps does Josh Gordon need? How many routes does he need to run in order to get a good number of targets and scores? The answer is not that many. I mean, and the nice thing about Gordon is that although he's been suspended, it's a different situation than lots of other suspended guys in that he's been in the compound. He's been working out with the team, with the strength and conditioning coaches, and they've had a sense of they should know where he is on a conditioning perspective, and it shouldn't take him all that long to show what he can do. And as long as he's got some level of chemistry with Brian Hoyer, then I wouldn't be surprised to see him. Is he going to take all 60 to 70 snaps and run 30 to 40 routes? I don't know that we'll see that for certain, but I don't think this is going to be a decoy situation. I don't think this is going to be a situation where he's put in high leverage repetition situations only. I wouldn't have any problems playing Josh Gordon, putting him in my lineup this week from an injury perspective, and I think they'd be silly. It's not like they've got 2 or 3 other options that are better than him or similar enough to him to move the chains down the field. They've been waiting for him to come back for a long period of time, and I think he gets high usage right away.
Yeah, Gene, I don't think there's there may be 2 or 3 options in the NFL who are better than him. But on another note, I'm watching Travis Kelce as they were driving down the field, and then Fasano scores a 19-yard reception, and I just think to myself, you see Kelce getting first downs as he's gets the ball in his hand on these short routes, and just imagine if Tom Brady were throwing the ball, or Aaron Rodgers, or somebody who could lead him downfield and throw an accurate pass downfield on like a crossing route, or better yet, oh my gosh, a seam route. That would be pretty nice to see Kelce do. But anyway, away from Alex Smith's, vertical game woes, and let's talk about another player who benefits very much from his quarterback, Julius Thomas. What's going on with the ankle? Do you think he's going to play?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been almost all the reports have suggested that it's a low-grade injury, that it's a low ankle sprain rather than a high ankle sprain, and then he'd probably have a good chance to play this week. But we've not seen him on the practice field at all on Wednesday and Thursday. He's been with Emmanuel Sanders, kind of stretching with the team, and then just in sweats and watching to the side. So tomorrow, Friday, is going to be a big day for us in terms of what his practice participation looks like. If he doesn't practice at all, then I think you have to worry that maybe he'll be on the doubtful side of a questionable listing. I expect him to be listed questionable tomorrow pretty much regardless of what happens. I suppose there's a chance that he could be listed as out, but I don't think we've heard anything to suggest that yet. Cecil may have a little bit better idea here, but I think my best guess would be that he'd try to get in a limited practice tomorrow so they could see what he'd be doing in terms of the game plan, in terms of how he would respond to a Friday practice on Saturday, and then we'll probably hear him as a game time decision. Is he going to be able to take his usual number of snaps and routes run this week? At this point, I'd be nervous that he would not be able to do that, and there's nothing to say that he's definitely going to be out, but with us not really knowing the full status of his ankle injury, and with him not being able to practice at all on Wednesday and Thursday, I think we have to be concerned that there's going to be some limitation this weekend for sure.
Well, I'm not complaining, although it may sound like it. The Julius Thomas show is on after me on ESPN Denver, and it was Julius Thomas today live at Jackson's with Nate Kreckman. Again, no offense, Nate, but Julius Thomas with me, I don't know, would have liked it. Anyway, now I am complaining. No limp, JT, no limp. And again, it's not like he's out there running routes, signing autographs, but at a public function and is a special edition of his show today, no limp. So that's the intel we can give you on the Denver situation. Let's continue around here, spin you around a couple more times here, Dr. Gene, like a record, and going inside the injury report. Of course, Dr. Gene Bramall, footballguys.com. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at Gene Bramall there as well. We talked about the Denver situation with Emmanuel and Julius. Let's talk about this situation in Chicago with Marshall and Jeffrey and the ankle and the hamstring. and we look at the Battle of Lovey. What did we decide to call it, Bloom? The Lovey Bowl, or
I think it said the McCown-McCustody battle.
It's like Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah.
So you got it looks great on paper. Any concerns here with Marshall, Jeffrey this week, Dr. Gene?
I don't think so. They were back at practice on Thursday, both of them, even in a limited fashion. We didn't hear that there was anything to be super concerned about with Jeffrey. It was kind of a surprise that he was on the injury report at all, at least to me. I didn't hear on Sunday last week that he had tweaked a hamstring. I'm not even sure if it's on the same side as the hamstring that we were worried about earlier in the year. And although Marshall practiced fully last week, there's no reason not to rest him a little bit when's necessary. So these are guys, when you go from no practice on Wednesday to a limited practice on Thursday, unless they don't, either one of them doesn't practice tomorrow, and we hear something concerning in the locker room. But I think that these guys, and they've proven that they can play through similar injuries very effectively in the past, both of them last week, in fact. So I don't think there's too much to be concerned about unless one of them isn't practicing tomorrow and they're not giving media interviews, and we hear from the coaching staff that there's some level of concern. If they're being called to game time decision, then I think maybe there's a little bit to be worried about, but I don't expect that that's going to be the case.
At this time of year in dynasty leagues, teams are selling off commodities that may not be able to help them this year for something in that final push to the championship. Some teams might either be looking to trade away or trade for Victor Cruz as part of these end of the season right before the trade deadline deals. Just going back over, and I know this is some stuff we talked about before, but how does his injury affect his future prognosis?
Well, I mean, it puts him in doubt a little bit. I mean, he's a little bit older than you might think that he is. He's been around a little while. I don't think he's 30 years old yet, but I think we decided, wasn't he 28 or 29, I believe. So, older guys have a little bit more trouble recovering from these injuries, and a big tendon injury like this, there's some pitfalls in the surgical repair of that. It has to be repaired in a way that, he's got the same range of motion. He's not going to have any chronic pain there. But we've seen, it seems like the primary surgeons that are doing these in all professional sports have got a pretty good handle on this. The surgeries have been pretty effective. The way the rehab is done has allowed players to get back without much scar tissue, without a whole lot of, longer-term setback. And it's generally a 6 to 9 month injury, and closer to 6 than 9 anymore. So I think, we're not going to know for certain about Cruz until we see what he looks like in training camp next year. But we've seen lots of players and skill position players. We had a long discussion about guys like Michael Crabtree and Demaryius Thomas last year, full versus partial Achilles tears. But we've seen wide receivers come back from Achilles repairs in the past. We've seen lots of edge rushers, including guys on the other side of 30, Derek Burgess, Greg Ellis, and those sorts of players, Terrell Suggs a couple of years ago, come back very effectively from these injuries. And I think Victor Cruz can have a good chance to do that. I would not pay full price for Victor Cruz at this point because we don't really know where things stand yet, but I don't think there's too much cause for concern. Ruben Randall really hasn't stepped forward. Odell Beckham looks like he's going to be a player there for certain, but there will be a role for Victor Cruz if he comes back healthy with the Giants next year.
Let's talk about Reggie Bush. Let's talk about Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush has a swollen ankle, and you said as long as he doesn't swell significantly overnight, he's likely to return this week. So how likely is his ankle to swell like his ex-girlfriend on the cover of that magazine that broke the internet?
Broke the internet, indeed. That's a situation we'll know tomorrow as well. I think it was a good sign that Bush was able to get to a limited practice on Thursday. And it's another situation similar to Arian Foster. We did just need to wait and see how this responds. Now, if it's a high ankle sprain like we all suspect that it is, there's two issues there. One, it may not respond overnight, and there may be a problem for Friday. But also, if he was fully ready to go, we'd have seen him take a full practice on Wednesday. So I don't think that he's 100% yet, and that puts him still in a category where if he gets hit in the right way or if his ankle gets twisted funny in a pile or he gets pulled down from behind, that there's a chance that he'll aggravate that injury again this weekend and continue to miss some time, come out with snap count and whatever. Joique Bell looks like he's in pretty good shape to play. It was a little bit of a surprise to see him on the injury report on Wednesday, but it seems more like maintenance than anything else, although he was listed with an ankle problem. And with Joique Bell and Theo Riddick both healthy and likely ready to take pretty close to their usual usage, I don't see much likelihood that Reggie Bush is all of a sudden going to get out there and take 12 to 15 plus touches. I think it's going to be a bit of a three-headed monster, but Bush's ultimate status is going to be determined on Friday.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night, except for next week because it's Thanksgiving. Almost every Thursday night. Dr. Gene, one more time here as we spin you around. Woo, woo. That's an Office Space reference. And I want to ask you about the did not practice for Marshawn Lynch. Now, he's okay because we know on Sunday this is what Lynch does. It's Wednesday and then Sunday is fine. But for the last 2 weeks, Dr. Gene, it has been Wednesday and Thursday. Is that maybe, it's obviously that extra rest that he'll need, and he'll still play Sunday. But now it used to be just Wednesday, no big deal. Veteran rest, we see it all the time. The last 2 weeks, it has been Wednesday and Thursday for Marshawn Lynch. Is that a sign that maybe things are piling up on Lynch there?
Well, it's possible, but I also think it's, he's had a lot more carries over the past couple of weeks. He's been running successfully. They've given him a lot more touches. He's had a little bit more to recover from. Really wasn't worried about the calf injury last week. I don't know that there's a lot to be worried about this week, but he is listed as having back. He's listed with a back on the injury report, and we know that back spasms have been the one thing that has slowed down Marshawn Lynch in the past. I think we talked about this earlier in the week on the waiver wire show that we still don't need to be, or maybe this time last week on Thursday, that I don't think it's time to get concerned about Lynch until we hear on Friday that there are issues, or maybe even Saturday that there's some concern. It always seems like some of these things go up to the 11th hour with Lynch, and he's on the bike and he's getting treatments through pregame warmups, and he comes out and does okay. But there have been instances where that's not been the case. It's been a while since that's happened. But I think whenever Marshawn Lynch is listed with a back injury, you have to be a little bit nervous about what that means for his weekend. I don't think Wednesday, Thursday worries me too much, but if we're not practicing by tomorrow and there's any indication that there may be trouble on Saturday, then we may want to rethink things. But for now, I don't think I'd put too much worry on him.
Gene, speaking of rethinking, I just want to ask you a general question. In your experience now, I mean, this is far from your first rodeo at parsing these things. We're 6 games, 6 weeks from the finish, and teams, it seems logical that teams would hold players out of practices more just to give them rest or to manage their injuries more. Otherwise, the calculus of how to parse missed practices or limited practices and how it may translate to availability on Sundays. Have you noticed that change as the season goes on, or is it something that really teams don't change?
I think they change it for sure. I think they try to get their players on the practice field on Thursday to get them some reps within the game plan, and everybody likes to see them participate in the walkthrough on Friday for the same reason. But especially with guys that have been in the system for a while, with veterans that have proven that they understand what's going on with the playbook and don't need a lot of reps to prove that they know what's going on with the game plan, then I think this time of year everybody's banged up. We talked about it a little bit with Phillip Rivers earlier this week, where there's lots and lots of guys that have multiple dings that don't get listed on the injury report at all because they're not getting that much treatment, and there really isn't a high chance at all that they won't be ready for the game that coming week, and that's the case with a lot of these veterans as well. But some of them have more injuries than others, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to be out on the practice field, especially during cold weather situations, if they can be inside getting treatment, or just plain not taking the risk that even a small percentage chance of something may happen while they're out there, that they take a funny step or somebody falls against them or whatever. Even in a walkthrough situation, they want them ready to go at as close to 100% as possible on Sunday. And although those walkthrough reps on Friday and the practices on Thursday, those reps are meaningful, they are not as meaningful as having them as close to full strength as possible for game day. So yeah, I think there's every reason to expect that some of these guys, especially if we know that they've been beat up or have a history of being beat up in previous years as the season goes along, for them to be held out a little bit more in week 12, 13, 14 than they would have been in week 2, 3, or 4.
Gene Fred Jackson, is he going to be hooting and tooting against the Jets in Detroit, or is he going to be playing a slow blues with Bright on the bench?
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be somewhere in between. I think he'll be hooting, but not necessarily tooting. We'll put it that way. I think this is probably the week he should have come back all along. Again, I'm just speculating that on what his injury looked like based on video and what we heard initially, that it just sounded like at least a 4-week injury to me. So for him to come back in 2.5 weeks, while it was a good show of how tough he is, he didn't have that much conditioning before he went into that game situation, so it's really not a surprise that he had a little bit of a minor aggravation. And because of that aggravation, he really wasn't able to do that much last week either, so we're still kind of in a place where he hasn't had a full week of conditioning like we've talked about with A.J. Green, like we talked about with Arian Foster a few weeks ago, like we've talked about with Gio Bernard now. He still hasn't been in that spot. And so, it'd be nice that he will have had multiple consecutive practices, but you still have to be concerned about his conditioning. And we talk about this a lot with hamstrings, but it goes for any lower leg muscle injury. 7 to 10 day window after first getting back to something resembling football-related activity is the window in which aggravations can still occur. And Jackson is not outside that window yet. So if he has a very good practice on Friday, maybe we see him. I think we'll probably see him take more reps than he did a couple of weeks ago in his first game back. But I don't think he's ready for a full workload yet, unless we see him in a full practice and we're hearing all kinds of optimistic things about him through the rest of the weekend.
He is Dr. Gene Bramall. You follow him on Twitter at Gene Bramall. That's with a J, people. If you can't spell it, get off the interwebs. And, of course, check out Gene Bramall's work at footballguys.com. Throw him a follow and start peppering him with questions. You always do your best, Dr. Gene, to get to everybody's questions on Twitter.
I try. It gets harder and harder, it seems, as the weekend goes along and there's more and more questions. So if I haven't gotten to your questions over the past couple of weeks, my apologies for that. But you're right. We do try to. I know all of us do try to get to as many as we can. We are fully aware that the only reason we're doing this is because we have you guys out there supporting us. So we appreciate your patience, even if we don't get to them right away.
Now, I don't know if your ears were ringing, Dr. Gene, but last week Adam Schefter and I were talking about you on the air.
Were you really?
Yeah, it was about Gio Bernard.
All right.
And Adam said, "What's Dr. Gene say?"
Well, that's interesting. I always get a little bit nervous when you have me on and you say, "This is the guy that Adam Schefter goes to for injury advice." And I think, you know what? We probably have had 3 or 4 conversations in my life, and it's nice that he remembers them. Maybe then.
No.
He's not ringing at all. That's cool. Thanks.
He's following along with everybody. And Dr. Gene, we appreciate your time. I toast a Goose Island India Pale Ale to you, my friend. And we bid you adieu for the evening. So.
Absolutely. And since we won't be back Thursday night, everybody have a safe travels during your Turkey Day week and enjoy Thanksgiving. And best to everybody over the next few days.
Very good. He is Dr. Gene Bramall. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night here on our YouTube Hangouts. Also Sunday morning Hangouts. Very popular, Bloom. How do you like getting in front of that camera on Sunday morning, Sigmund?
It's fun. I think that I made a little speech about this a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, that I grew up on Jimmy the Greek and the Sunday morning shows when they were must-see TV. Really, there was the only thing. I mean, there was no internet. There wasn't really a lot of sports publications and things like that. So waking up on Sunday mornings to watch those shows was a big ritual of watching football, and it's really fun to get to engage with Gene and Matt and the audience as some of it is just sharing in the buzz and the excitement of a Sunday morning. There's nothing like a football Sunday, and I like getting it kicked off as early as possible.
Kicked off as early as possible. Matt Waldman, our wardrobe is it's making the rounds on Twitter, man. People saying that Bloom looks like he just got back from a wedding reception.
Right.
Also, Kean says that he would avoid me in an alley.
Yeah.
All right. Well, always keep them guessing. That's my motto.
I think Fatty's smart on that one.
I'm so excited about my deep V-cut, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death T-shirt, little MMA style. I just talked to Joe Rogan this week, but I need more chest hair. You and Sigmund are really hairy, man. I don't know, transplant or what's going on here?
It's the lineage.
Yep, it's the Russian thing, man.
Yeah.
As Sigmund undoes, I wanted Sigmund to undo that button, so mission accomplished there.
This is going to turn into chat roulette any second now.
Hairy animals.
I guess I'm just a hairy half Mexican, or non-hairy half Mexican, I should say. Let's move into the news and notes, but before we do, Bloom, game update, please.
Game update is that, as I said about 15 minutes ago on Twitter, I may have bloomed the Raiders, and I'm sorry, Raiders fans, because it was 17-3, and the Chiefs hadn't changed their offense. The Chiefs looked like they were still trying to grind out 8-minute field goal drives. This isn't going to work unless the Raiders continue to fumble punts inside the 10, and we've already had Denarius Moore pulled from punt returns, so that didn't seem like it was going to happen. But now Alex Smith is throwing downfield. And by the way, as my mentions filled up with people saying, I'm done with Travis Kelce. You want to know what it takes for Travis Kelce to have a good fantasy game? Are people filling up my mentions saying, I'm done with Travis Kelce. That's it. And now Travis Kelce, last we saw, just catching another pass downfield. And one of the things I want to point out about Kelce, and we've made these comparisons, and Matt, you're smiling. I mean, I can go back to conversations we had about Travis Kelce pre-draft, where it's like, this guy looks like Gronk. I mean, he plays like Gronk. And one of the keys, not just the number, not just the physical attributes, not just his ability to be aggressive in all aspects of the game, but at the end of a play with Travis Kelce, he looks like he was just thrown out of a car that was in a car accident or something. I mean, he throws his body around. He has no regard for himself, no regard for the other players on the field, which is where the Gronk comparison really ties the room together. I think it was Jeremy Ross from the Lions. They were talking about Gronk this week, and he called him a meathead, and he said he meant that in the best possible way. And it goes back to what I was saying about why I wasn't worried about Gronkowski this preseason and offseason coming back from the knee injury. You would say, well, there's a mental part of the game coming back from all those injuries. There's no mental part of Gronk's game. There's no mental part of Kelsey's game, I think, either.
They're just goofy.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, well, they have a playfulness and again a lack of regard for their own body that allows them to do things, and it's like a joyous way of playing the game, and I enjoy that.
Gronk was interviewed by Rodney Harrison on Sunday night on NBC, and they were doing kind of the whole let's pretend I'm still a safety and you're gonna like
Rodney Harrison does that on every interview.
Yeah, so they do that, but also talking about just his joyfulness for the game. And he said, look, I had my teammates laughing at me because I beat somebody down the field in practice, and I was laughing the entire time while I was on my break catching the ball over my head, and I'm just laughing and having a good time. I mean, and I do that on the field. So they all know that he's a little crazy like that, but you gotta like guys like that. Those are the type of guys. When I have my Save the Galaxy team that I'll print on the RSP blog, he'll definitely be on that team as the Save the Planet team, as one of those starters.
Guardians of the Galaxy, if you will.
All right, absolutely. You have to have guys who just don't care. They're so goofy they don't care. It'll just confound the aliens.
Right. So that being said, I believe that Gronk will be Star-Lord in this. I think he needs to be now he's Drax the Destroyer. So anyway, very proud of my first appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy right here.
He is absolutely not to take this conversation and turn it in another direction, but whether it's football or comic books or whatever, Gronk is exactly the kind of character. He's in the archetype of the Save the World character. He's just too dumb to realize that he can't do it, so maybe he can do it.
He and Brett Favre, man, perfect catch combination right there. I mean, Brett Favre would be my quarterback. I mean, it's not even close. Because and Gronkowski would be his great sidekick right there.
And meanwhile, on the radio from like the mothership is Ray Lewis going, "Come on, you can do it. We're gonna do this."
I'm sure Ray Lewis lands on a planet and picks up the dirt, throws it. Yeah. And does his dance. I dance on your planet. Let's jump in from something fun to something very, very, very serious. Thoughts, prayers, positive vibes, everything to the people of Buffalo or the people affected by the snowstorm. And to talk about fantasy football when lives are being lost, homes are being lost, there's a travel ban around Buffalo. I don't want to disrespect those that are dealing with it now. Bloom and Matt, I know we got a lot of listeners in that area across the whole country, but Buffalo fans, so good, just so good, hardy people, great football fans. I remember when Sammy Watkins was drafted by Buffalo, I had said on these airwaves and like every show that I'm on, like my best friend who was going through chemo at the time, his wish was, I just want the Bills. Big E just wanted Sammy, and I got so many messages from Bills fans and Bills Mafia that, hey, Big E got Sammy, and they were so happy. Like, I love Buffalo, man. I love Buffalo fans, and now this game has been moved. Buffalo's inability to practice. again, I don't want to disrespect the situation, Bloom, but fantasy owners now looking to these two teams in Buffalo and the Jets. What do fantasy owners do here, Bloom, in your eyes?
I think you can't change your perspective, and I do want to say, and I know Matt can nod along. I went to school for 4 years in Syracuse, New York. Matt has Cleveland roots, and even you see your share of some snowstorms. So we feel we have not felt 76 inches of snow in a day kind of pain, but I do want to say that it is a testament to the people of the area, and I know many of them. I've spent lots of time in the Buffalo area. I think Buffalo and Pittsburgh are sister cities, and the whole throughway, whether it's Utica or Rochester, or Albany, there's definitely some kinship as you go along the New York Thruway there and the winter. But what I love is the spirit of the Buffalo folks, making refrigerators out of the snow piled up outside of their door, and otherwise, you're not seeing chaos. You're seeing people pull together, and you're seeing people stay very level-headed in a very, very scary situation. So I think that it's almost the calm and the fortitude of the Buffalo people that are making it harder for everybody else to grasp just how serious the situation is there. So definitely something. Now, as far as this game goes, it may be thrown off a little bit as far as the timing, practices, and things like that. It may have the choppiness of a Thursday night game. The crowd's not going to be connected or too into the game. It's going to be a bit strange. I think Michael Vick maybe becomes a better desperation play because the game will be indoors on a fast track. I think it may induce you to look at somebody like a Percy Harvin more indoors on a fast track. I think that Sammy Watkins will benefit, and Sammy Watkins and Fred Jackson will benefit from the extra day of rest. So there are some factors here, but otherwise I think you're basically using the same decisions whether to play your Bills or Jets that you would before. It just changes the timing of the revealing of how our matchups go, and more football. Hey, if you were to say you could have 15 hours of football on this week or 18 hours of football on this week, I know what my answer would be.
Always the 18.
Yeah,
more. More, please. Please, sir, can I have some more? Can I have some more Matt Waldman time here on this subject, Matt? With these two teams now moving this game to Monday into a much different location.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Bloom earlier this week offline about the connections between Cleveland and Buffalo, and kind of saying that they were kind of like sibling cities when it came to football, also being on the lake and having a lot of similarities in terms of their fans and the outcomes of their football teams, and how you could really just combine the two cities at their midpoint, which is Erie, Pennsylvania, and they could be kind of we could just rename the football team the Erie something or other. But really when you look at this, I remember growing up in Cleveland and at a snowstorm where we had 73 below zero temperatures. They declared a state of emergency in the city, and we had close to 40 inches of snow. And I remember being, my family had been evacuated out of the apartment complex we were in because it was just too cold to be able to be there. And I can't even imagine what that type of snow would be like for what Buffalo's experienced, because it's much more than what they had back in 76, 77, whenever that was. So looking at this, I would say that it's a nice distraction for Buffalo to be in Detroit, and and they would probably be excited about getting out of their homes and being able to play this game. If anything, I almost kind of expect it to be reversed, where the Jets is just kind of more of an inconvenience, as opposed to for the Bills, it's more of a relief. And I would say that if I'm going to play amateur psychologist here, my guess would be that the Bills are going to be on for this game and the Jets are going to be off. That, and I just like egging on Mr. Chase anytime I get not.
We do love a good Chase Stewart reference. It is the Audible Live, and we're going around some news and notes here. Big news coming out of New England with LeGarrette Blount force trauma. That's one way to get shipped out of Pittsburgh, is pouting and leaving the game early. Well, he did, and it didn't take long. He wasn't claimed on waivers like Ben Tate. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the Blount situation, Bloom, I'll start with you, Matt. Obviously want you to chime in on this as well. I have a Just the Tip segment on my show, Bloom, and my Just the Tip this week was like, great, you got Jonas Gray, and you're not going to start him. It's Detroit. Now, not only this week, okay, because we've got the preview show to talk about this week and our thoughts on the New England running back situation. Feels like more of a Vereen week against a front four, a front seven like Detroit can bring to the table. But now that Blunt is with the Patriots, Jonas Gray owners, I mean, people maxed out their credit cards, their fantasy budget, you know what I mean? You spent all your waiver bucks. You got Jonas Gray. You were on top of the mountain. You're like, yes, I got him. And now this. Your thoughts, Bloom?
No worries. I mean, okay, Jonas Gray's not going to have 37 carries for 201 yards again. He might have 4 touchdowns again. He's not going to get 37 carries again. He can definitely be a flex player or running back 2 play. And what folks need to look at here is when the Patriots go power run, there's enough to feed more than one mouth. Last year in Week 16, LeGarrette Blount had 16 for 76 and 2 touchdowns. Ridley had 15 carries in that game. In Week 17, Blount had 24 for 189 and 2 touchdowns. Ridley had 12 carries in that game. In the playoff game, whenever Blount had 4 touchdowns, we saw Ridley have double-digit carries against the Colts in that game, too. So instead, we may see Gray's line against Chicago, if they're successful establishing that power run, as something like, 18 carries for 82 yards and a touchdown, very flex-worthy, and still with upside. So, I mean, this is one of the things you have to like about the Patriots, and they show this again and again, is if it's working, they're not going to go away from it. So games where Jonas Gray was going to be a good play, he's a slightly less good play, but he's still a good play. The team is impressed with him. This is just the Patriots doing what the Patriots do. And you're going to throw the Garrett Blount to the curb. He knows our system. We know we can trust him. We don't want to be left, if Jonas Gray goes down, without any power running element in our offense. We plan on going all the way to the Super Bowl, so we have to do our due diligence. I think this is not something to read into as any kind of misgivings about Jonas Gray. It's just a smart move by the Patriots.
It's Belichick being Belichick, and if all roads to the Super Bowl go through Foxborough, as they very well will and may, you need 2 snowplows, Matt.
Yeah.
Now they got him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm watching rookie Albert Wilson finally get a little bit of play and take a crossing route, break a couple of tackles, make someone miss, and get up the sideline.
Running hard, too. I love it. I love it when you can see that guy is like exerting himself to get every little bit of effort he has in his body, and I think you see that.
He's not this guy, but there's a little Steve Smith to his play.
Yes.
He has at it. He's aggressive. He'll fight you, and he's small, but he plays large for his size. So it's fun to watch him play. Steve Smith probably would have been gone on that play. Well, maybe not with Woodson. But anyway, talking about Blount, I echo exactly what Sigmund said about him, and would say that go further and just say the average number of carries Blount had over the last 5 games last year in New England was about 14 carries per game. So, and that was as the change up. So there's really not much different, because Vereen was healthy last year too at the end of the season. So you had Ridley and Vereen still there. Heck, they still had Brandon Bolden still available to play a little bit at one point. So the way I would look at this is that you're probably going to see somewhere between 8 to 12 carries conservatively for Blount, but it still means that Gray is most likely to be that guy, and you want to have depth. You can head into the playoffs, and if Gray falters or gets hurt, you're going to want to have somebody out there who knows your system, who you can rely on, and why not pick somebody up that you signed for a 2-year veteran minimum, and know that you can just pull him out of your back pocket and insert him in the lineup and get starter running back play as necessary for your team. And you can put him in on kickoffs once again, where he thrived for them all last year. So it's a great move for them. We don't know exactly what the whole thing was in Pittsburgh. We know that Blount has been a problem pretty much wherever he's gone on some level, one way or the other, but it seems that New England seems okay with him, which means that they feel like they know how to handle him, and that's great.
Well, we talked about meatheads earlier in the show. LeGarrette Blount, one of those guys he wants to smash people. Matt, I always flash back to you and I talking to him at the Senior Bowl, sitting across from him and Ed Dixon, a couple of Ducks, and hey, describe your favorite play. And, Anthony Dixon gave you like a 6-minute answer. LeGarrette Blount just told us, I don't know, man. I just want to run over people.
Hulk smash. That was basically it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And he had a little Hulk in him against Boise State, as we all remember.
Yes. Was it a left hook? I can't remember exactly. Let's talk about the other running back that was dumped this week in Ben Tate. Bloom, we'll start with you in Minnesota, where both McKinnon and Asiata are a bit banged up. Your thoughts on this addition of Ben Tate and the Browns saying no more and Minnesota saying yes, please?
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to see a player get his release. I think that's something we don't see all that often as a player say, I don't like what's going on here, so I want my release. I think it's more about Asiata's concussion than McKinnon be a little banged up, and whether Asiata may honestly not be available this weekend. It may just be a simple Band-Aid. And the thing is, that denies us, if that truly is it, and I think it is, that denies us, he would have gone down to Indianapolis, and that would have been a much more interesting place for him to land. Or I want to point out Arizona, the other team to put in a claim for him. So I think that there's not too much to read in here about McKinnon long term. I don't think there's much to read in here about what Minnesota thinks of Ben Tate long term. I think it's just a team doing its due diligence, and his contract was structured in such a way that it was very cheap to claim him instead of waiting for him to get released, and like New England did with Blunt, sign him to the better minimum. So I think that in the wake of that, though, like everybody, like we even need to clarify this. It's so funny, Cease, because I feel like this is almost like talking to people who don't watch or show or subscribe to Football Guys or get the RSP. So it's like, if you aren't listening right now, this message is for you. That it is going to be Crowell is the guy you want to own in the wake of that. It's Crowell, and if Crowell fumbles, but now they're making excuses for his fumbles. So what does that tell you? When a coach is saying, well, that was a really good play by Cushing. I'm not really too worried about that fumble. So they want Crowell to be the guy. You want Crowell on your roster.
Yeah, Crowell is the man. And by the way, it's Crowell. I don't know how many times I get the Cromwell.
Yeah.
I love the Cromwell reference. Matt, to you with Ben Tate here, and nothing to see, people. I mean, what's your thoughts here with Ben Tate now in Minnesota?
Well, maybe they believed Ben Tate when he said that he was the best running back in his draft class and as good as Adrian Peterson back, or compared himself to Adrian Peterson back in the day when he was at Auburn. But no, I mean, you look at him and he's probably the best fit. He's a good combination of McKinnon and Asiata when you think of that. I mean, he's not nearly as explosive as McKinnon, but he's got the power like Asiata. They hope that maybe if he's healthy enough to go and they feel like that they can get some good work out of him, that he can provide a little bit more, I would say, versatility where they can keep him in the ball game maybe. And that helps out the offense overall from a standpoint of rhythm, play calling, that sort of thing. And from that standpoint, he's also a veteran, which would help a guy like McKinnon, who isn't getting a whole lot of help from Adrian Peterson right now. So, it could help a young guy like McKinnon kind of get a feel for what's going on in the ballgame. Certainly, I would imagine that both Terrence West and Isaiah Crowell got a little bit of help of being able to chance to have a guy like Tate as a veteran ahead of them and see what that means and what the work ethic means, as well as, making certain types of reads and pass protections and all that. So it might also be more of a, let's put a veteran on this team who can help out as well.
Back to you, Matt, and then Bloom, of course, chime in on this as well. Boom Herron. A lot of people now saying, well, what do you think of Boom Herron? For me personally, I've never been impressed either in college or at the pro level with Boom Herron. Rigid, lack of proper foot frequency, seems kind of stiff when he's trying to make some cuts. Does he have a little bit of pop? A little. Does he have a little bit of speed? A little. But I don't love his instincts. So as far as Boom Herron goes, Tate would have been a much better, complimentary back there. Now that we're going to see no Ahmad Bradshaw for Indianapolis, sure, more Trent Richardson perhaps. There's going to be something there for Boom Herron. I don't believe he responds in the way that people would like him to, or anyone out there in fantasy grabbing him thinking you have something. Not in my opinion. Matt, you're up, then Bloom, of course.
Boom Herron deserves his nickname when it comes to being a college player, when it comes to being a guy who's good enough to be on an NFL team and a couple of NFL teams long enough. But in terms of fantasy football and in terms of being a long-term starter, his nickname in the NFL should be Fizzle, not Boom.
I was gonna say bang snap, like those little bang snaps you used to get, like
The little popper things. The little
yeah, bang snap Heron. I mean,
He's just not. I mean, Marcel Reese is 10 times the back. As
right.
Boom
We're
Herron
watching
is.
Reese.
And we're watching. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that Boom Herron is one of the definitions. I mean, you could not find a better back to be Exhibit A of if what you see is what you get. There's just he doesn't add anything on any of his touches. He's kind of I don't want to say poor man's because it makes it sound so bad. He's in the Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis mold. I mean, he is a back who understands, which direction you're supposed to run. He understands. I mean, no, I don't I never understood why they would. I never understood why they would keep him over Dion Lewis. I never understood it.
He understands which direction to run. He understands basic football concepts. That way.
I'm trying to come up with something complimentary to say about his game to make
He
him
looks
stand
both ways before he crosses the road.
That's not complimentary, Blue.
He put his pads on the right way, His uniform's not
He's
backwards.
not a complete running back imbecile.
Oh my God. We have fun on this show. It is the Audible Live here, footballguys.com. You listen to the show on iTunes. Make sure to watch us on YouTube. Check us out. Subscribe, footballguys.com on youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. We'll gather ourselves a little bit. Bloom, can you think of some better compliments you're wiping your eyes?
Yeah.
Bloom made himself cry.
Oh, we all do.
We're more compliments or complissults. But Stefan Taylor,
Yeah.
for those that don't know, it was on the cutting room floor, but we're doing the waiver wire show.
Right.
And I'm about to tell you about one of my buddies who's an idiot, and you're like, Ben Tate! And so we start going through the list of teams, and when we got to Arizona, we're like, yeah, because Stefan Taylor, good all-around guy, knows which direction to go, good receiver out of the backfield. I appreciate Stefan Taylor more than I do Boom Herron.
Right.
There would have been a bit more there with Tate, in my opinion. Obviously, they wanted to put in that claim. They did put in that claim. So, Bloom, your thoughts here with Stefan Taylor now, as, Andre Ellington continuing to be a little bit more banged up the last couple of weeks. What is it, like 60 yards rushing over the last 2 weeks, something like that? So, could have been something there with the Cardinals, but Stefan Taylor remains as that backup. Your thoughts?
Yeah, there's just not much there. I mean, these guys that go in the 4th, 5th round, I suppose we can start to make a bit of a distinction between third day and undrafted running backs who fall that far and have some sort of ceiling. Latavius Murray tonight, a good example because of his measurables, or Isaiah Crowell, a good example because of the talent that we knew was there. Okay, then we have running backs who go on the third day because they're competent. They're players that you feel okay on their depth chart because they can play more than one role in the offense. Maybe they can play special teams, and I'm going to think of Stephen Taylor coming into the league with Mike Gillislee. And both of these guys I watched and I said, well, if you keep them as a third or fourth running back on your roster and injuries strike, you can plug them into some holes. I mean, and when you think about it, it's like the dam is breaking. You can plug them in. They can fill those holes. They're not going to add anything. Remember that Jonathan Dwyer, I mean, this team was willingly playing Jonathan Dwyer a lot. Taylor was a little banged up too, but there's just not much to see there. So I don't think this is going to be one of those chance for Stephen Taylor to show how much he had. I think that sometimes there are just running backs who have a very limited ceiling in the NFL, and he's one of them.
Matt, your thoughts here on Stefan Taylor. I mean, if the dam is truly breaking and if the water's coming through the dike, it's like putting a finger in.
Yeah, and he's got enough burst that you could pop that cork in pretty fast. But the whole thing is with Stephen Taylor is that his burst has always been there, He didn't add any more of that. He didn't add any more long speed. He didn't get any stronger. His vision didn't get much better than what it already was. Again, as Bloom said, I'll kind of delineate that a little bit more and say guys who should have been first or second or third round picks and guys who we know were later round for the reasons Bloom described, which is that versatility angle. Now, there are examples that I would say players can get better who are later round guys and get better over the next few seasons as they transition to the NFL. But Taylor's been in the league long enough now that if he was going to make a bigger leap physically as an athlete or gain something as a conceptual runner, which I don't think he needed to do a ton of, he would have already done it, I think, by this point. Marion Grice is an example of a guy who could easily go the way of Stephon Taylor and just be a versatile guy who catches the ball well, who you can plug in and do all right, but it is his first season. He was coming off a foot injury last year. He could get a little bit more burst, and you might see something from it. An example of someone who bounced around the league a lot, who you saw the spark, and over time you might go, yeah, he was good. He shows a little something. There's something that intrigues me, but never got it done until this year over a consistent period is Justin Forsett. So, a guy like that, there are exceptions to that rule, but I would say by and large, I'm in agreement with Bloom. I mean, there's, I think I mentioned on our in some emails that Arizona seemed like a pretty good fit there too to have Tate because of Ellington's injury history and just the fact that they didn't have much behind him.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. A big topic that we've discussed, preview shows, of course, on the couch. We've got eight episodes for you every single week. We give you the hookup. But Josh Gordon, we've got some questions coming in via Twitter. At RaiderMatt01 says, will Josh Gordon's return make Hoyer a relevant matchup play at quarterback? Bloom, your thoughts here on Gordon?
I'm open to it, and I wouldn't be against putting him in this week, depending on, some of the choices I might put Hoyer in if you're a streamer over maybe Phillip Rivers, just because he's been so banged up, and we saw what St. Louis did to Peyton Manning. Maybe Andy Dalton, just because, we've seen both ends of the spectrum. Do you really want to mess around with someone like that? I think Kyle Orton's safe now that game's going to be indoors. I think Josh McCown. McCown and Orton would be streaming options I would go ahead of Hoyer, although we saw Hoyer in the two games with Gordon and Jordan Cameron, which might make a difference, put up some good numbers. And we have seen Hoyer have some boldness throwing downfield this year, too. So I think that if you're looking for the matchup, this would be the matchup. So if when the dust settles, Hoyer has 300 yards and multiple touchdowns, it won't surprise me one bit. I still have McCown and Orton ahead of him in my streamer preferences this week.
Matt, what do fantasy owners do with Gordon this week?
You start him, absolutely, because if, everyone says how good Desmond Trufant's playing as a cornerback, and he's a feisty guy, but Marcus Wheaton made mincemeat out of him at the Senior Bowl, and we've seen how Marcus Wheaton has looked so far in his career. And then we could look at someone like Aqib Talib, who shut down Kenny Britt after Britt had, his 4 receptions for 128 yards. Then he had 3 receptions for almost 100 yards, and then they put Talib on him, and Talib was playing off coverage, and he allowed a slant inside, and then that was about it for the rest of the game. Britt didn't get a target; it was well covered. And then you have the 80-yard touchdown that Gordon had on Talib last year when Talib was in New England and made Talib look like an utter weakling that had sand kicked in his face. So, here's the thing. To talk about Hoyer, last week Hoyer went 20 for 50 against the Texans and had 300 yards. And, you could characterize that as a horrible game, but if you chart the plays, which I did, of his drops, of his misses, he had 16, he had 14 misses in that game. So there were some plays on the deep routes where he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and it was pretty apparent. But he also had 16 plays that were either 10. He had 10 drops, 2 deflections. He had 2 throwaways. He had a miss due to getting hit. He had a drop that created an interception, and then another drop that should have been caught in bounds. So the Browns receivers didn't help him out that much either. Josh Gordon is probably going to help him out an awful lot. And as Bloom said, he is aggressive. He will go downfield. And while right now this year the Browns have had to rely a lot on play action misdirection plays, bootlegs to one side, throws to the opposite, especially with Jordan Cameron out. And Cameron is only going to get you so many yards downfield after he catches the football. So it's going to be a seam route somewhere between 20 to 30, 35 yards tops. Hoyer's strength of his game is anticipation, not distance with his throws. He doesn't have that strong arm. But with a guy like Josh Gordon, you don't need to throw the ball 50 yards downfield and let him go up for grabs to win it. Really what you need to do is you see him go downfield on streak one-on-one coverage, you just throw it, let him out-muscle the guy on the move or get behind the guy and catch the ball in stride with good anticipation, which is what Hoyer showed in spades last year. And also the fact that Hoyer is going to hit the guy on slant routes, crossing routes, hitches one-on-one, where cornerback's going to bounce off like Gordon like a fly on a windshield or stick to him and just kind of slide off, and the next thing you know, Gordon is gone for a 50, 60, 80-yard touchdown run. That's what we saw a lot of last year from him too. So big plays aren't necessarily long plays with the ball in the air as much as it is a nice anticipatory pass, hitting the guy in stride, and letting the big fella do his work. And I think that's what we're going to see this week against Atlanta, who's given up, I believe, 12 100-yard games to 12 different receivers over an 11-week seasons thus far.
It is the Audible Live Thursday nights right here on YouTube. And, of course, you hear the show on iTunes as well. We thank everyone out there for listening and subscribing to the show on iTunes, Stitcher Radio as well, if you want to listen to us via the Stitcher Radio app. We appreciate each and every one of you out there. The Twitter questions coming in. Bloom, a quick, as we got a commercial break, looks like here, a quick game update, if you would, please, sir.
Marcel Reese is getting a drive, and they're taking it down to the 2-minute warning, and he's been powering them to hopefully, I say this for the Raiders fans that I bloomed when I said at 17-3 there was no chance the Chiefs were going into this game without Raiders turnovers. Well, there's your chance, and they're driving them down the field. So, and this is a massive, massive game for the Chiefs. Next week, Denver, and the week after that, Arizona. So you're 7-3. If you can't escape with this win, you're looking down the barrel 7-6. And it certainly does feel like this year that every time a team starts to stabilize themselves in the AFC in this morass, and this includes teams like Denver. We waiting for the other shoe dropping for New England. Every time we start to feel secure about a team in that AFC playoff bracket or a team starts to create some momentum, then they trip themselves up. So we'll see if Kansas City comes out of the tailspin here and holds, as they're at the 12, 11 yard line, 3rd and 1, driving here again. Marcel Reese getting all the work. And I think it's a fantastic thing to see that this is happening on a Thursday night, because Marcel Reese is another one of those players that we've been saying for years now deserves more touches. And now to get that 0 out of the win column for the Raiders, he's been slaving away for them forever. He can add that to his Raiders storybook.
Yeah, a fantastic Raiders storybook. Matt, Marcel Reese, I mean, no offense to Michael Rivera or anyone else, but the fact that Dennis Allen and now Tony Sperano, it takes this to recognize, wait, what? We should use Marcel Reese more with everything that he can do, and we saw a little bit a couple years ago with 73 targets and 52 catches, and 59 carries. But why this guy doesn't get 125 carries in a year? Maybe a little bit more, in addition to 50 receptions. He could do it.
Sometimes a good pickup truck is better than whatever else you think you're going to get out of the showroom, and I think that's the problem there, is that they're always eyeing something better in the showroom. And, it's nice to watch this game. it's nice. I like the fact that this is the best game so far of the Thursday night season, or arguably one of them. And I've always been a fan. I was joking with, I think, Dexter's Library on Twitter today because he was talking about this game, and I said, I don't know, maybe it's the age in me, but I always savor Kansas City Oakland games because there's always something wild, woolly, and just weird that goes on with those two teams in their rivalry matchup. And maybe I'm just showing my age, but again, it's kind of lived up to form thus far with the crazy mud and Murray getting a knockout punch and having what I don't know how long was a 90-yard touchdown, and just kind of going back and forth with two teams that Charles Woodson. That's an example. You watch Charles Woodson in this game. The guy is older than Methuselah, and they have him returning punts, and he looks better than Moore. And he's past the point of, oh, we must protect him because he's a veteran. Let's just put him out on the field. He's like so old that they don't even care about how they're going to use him. They just stick him on the field now and just say, what the heck, he might disintegrate tomorrow, but we're going to go ahead and use him until that time.
A couple of Twitter questions here before I tie a bow on tonight's show. Marcus Mosier chimes in via Twitter. Long term, what do you guys think of Joseph Randle? Could he carry the load in Dallas? Bloom, your thoughts on Joseph Randle?
Yeah, what's interesting is I thought Randle looked like more of a third down type back. I didn't see him run with a lot of power, break a lot of tackles. He was a back with a little bit of dynamism in the open field if he was able to break through that level without having to do anything too nifty. And there's the touchdown to Derek Carr, celebrating in a way that we rarely got to see his big brother celebrate. We got about one. You can't leave Alex Smith 142. I shouldn't say that though, because Alex Smith did have some comebacks for San Francisco. But this is as Matt said, it's perfect that this is the best Thursday night game.
It's like Denbrell Tompkins, I think, or was that Jones?
James Jones. James Jones, yeah.
James Jones, there we go. Good.
Yeah. So going back to, I love, by the way, some people saying you hate the Raiders because you bloom them, and maybe hopefully I didn't bloom them, but if they're showing the shots of the sand, I love the fans in the Raiders crowd. I think that there's a theatrical gladiator blood sport element to the NFL that they get, that they really embrace the exaggerated nature, life and death and obliteration and annihilation, and so I really do love that, and I think that this is why I want the Raiders to have a good team again. Also because the Raiders and the Steelers, I mean, that was the rivalry that was the genesis of the Steelers, and I know Raiders fans out there say, don't remind us.
When Darth Vader looks normal in a crowd, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Actually, they're just leftovers from a Guar concert, but still. And I'm glad nobody's hiding under the tarp up there in the third level. So
Right. But and Cease, anytime you get compared to anything having to do with the Guar concert, then you're doing something right. So on the Joseph Randle tip, I was not very impressed with him coming out of Oklahoma State, and I really thought that there were other running backs Dallas should have taken with that pick. And what we saw with Randle this year is he looks a little bit thicker. He has a little more burst through the hole, more physicality, almost like he's taking after DeMarco Murray in a way. And I was surprised at how good he looked, plus with the offensive line. The big question here is DeMarco Murray and his next contract, but man, I cannot imagine Jerry Jones not ponying up the money. So Joseph Randle, we look at him as probably the long-term handcuff to DeMarco Murray, but I think because of the offensive line, because how he seems to be mimicking Murray's no-nonsense style, that could be a plug-and-play back if Murray misses time. I'm almost back on the older years. We say when, but he's recharged and happy, and knock on wood, he's going to give us 5 more good weeks.
That was actual wood you knocked on as well.
Hardwood, yeah.
There we go. And with Joseph Randle, you mentioned coming out of Oklahoma State. I mean, if football was played in a straight line, he was awesome. Right. You know what I mean? Straight line speed, but as you mentioned, thicker. And that offensive line, it's no-nonsense running. Okay, there's no nuance to it. Don't have to worry about that cutback lane. Just follow that line, and he's not as powerful. Doesn't run with his head down like DeMarco either, but not as powerful. But you've got the ability to run through some more arm tackles. Joseph Randle, and again, current incarnation. I say it all the time. Like, what's the current incarnation of a player? Because we watch him in college, we watch him on the All-Star road trip or wherever, and we're like, okay, this is what we like, this is what we don't like. How have they changed? How have they grown? How have they matured? How have they become professionals? And Joseph Randle's done a better job here. Back to Twitter, Andy Nichols chimes in. Who benefits more in New Orleans with Cooks out, Colston Stills or someone else? Matt, you're up there. New Orleans situation. You got Cooks out, Colston Stills, or someone else?
Pierre Thomas is probably the guy that I'm going to go with, only because when Pierre Thomas gets back, they're going to reincorporate that screen draw swing game that they have. He's going to get more usage in the red area, and I think that when you look at Stills, I really like Stills as a talent, but he's somewhere between Colston and Cooks as a player. And what that really means is that he's not big enough to really dominate people one-on-one, and he's not explosive enough to win after the catch at the level that Cooks. He's certainly a guy that can make big plays, but they haven't used him an awful lot this year. And when they do, they use him on third down. They'll use him on some of the back shoulder plays. They often use him in conjunction with one of their slot players like Colston and Graham to get open by confusing a defense like they did against Cincinnati last week for his one touchdown. And he can do a lot of that and get open for you deep, but the problem is he had that quad injury at the beginning of the year, and it really sidelined him for the entire summer. And you kind of have to wonder if he's not playing all that much, and they've got Joe Morgan in there over him. And Joe Morgan is an interesting talent, but he hasn't exactly set the world on fire with any deep plays this year either. Is Stills completely healthy, and he's been playing hurt all year and not quite right all year. So I'm a little skeptical of him. I think of him as more of a puncher's chance at being a wide receiver 3 who can give you wide receiver numbers any week if he gets wide open on a deep pass. But to me, the guy that's going to benefit more is most likely Pierre Thomas coming back and them using him in the way that they use a change-up player who can work out on the in the slot, split them out wide, and also use them in the backfield in not the same way that they use Cooks, but in a similar way that benefits the offense.
Back to Twitter, and this one comes in from @VoodooRageDDS. Bloom, it's for you. Thoughts on Golden Tate for the rest of the way? Now we know Golden Tate this week. He's going to draw Darrelle Revis. That's what the early intel says. And then the rest of the way, Chicago, Tampa, Minnesota,
Yep.
those are all at home.
Yep.
And then at Chicago. My God, Golden Tate. Thoughts here, Bloom?
I would be okay with him as my wide receiver 3. And I think what we have here is Golden Tate before Calvin Johnson got hurt, 6 for 93, 5 for 57, 5 for 51, and then Golden Tate in the first game back against Miami, with Johnson's first game back, had 11 for 109. Last week, I only had 2 for 41 as the offense sputtered. This week, as you said, Revis Island, and that just makes sense for Revis to be on Tate instead of Calvin Johnson. Mainly because if you put Brandon Browner on Golden Tate, look out. He's gonna go around him like a maypole. So I think that it's weeks 13 to 16, and what you have is the chemistry that's been established, the trust that has been established. Going back to the games where Golden Tate made big plays against New Orleans, against Atlanta, to help fuel this team comeback wins. That's not something that just goes away because Calvin Johnson is back. So I think Golden Tate is still someone you trust. Not this week. I would try to bench him this week if you can. But weeks 13 to 16, I would love to have him as my third wide receiver, or flex in PPR leagues especially.
Cecil.
Yeah.
Cecil.
Yeah.
You said that the guy who asked that question was Voodoo Rage DDS.
That's it.
Hey.
So
Yeah.
is he like a voodoo dentist? Is that what we have going on here? Does he have like voodoo dolls of cavities or something that he like?
See, he wants you to call him a witch doctor, but dentists aren't doctors.
Think Steve Martin. I'll see if you can get this. If you get this one, Matt. Think Steve Martin in Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, absolutely. But we need to have him more in like we need to have him like holding the straw dolls and with the pins, of little teeth. He's got a molar or a bicuspid that he's like doing. I don't know whether I want to go to him as a dentist or I want to avoid him entirely. I think I'd probably want to go just to take my chances.
Just have fun and see.
A little laughing gas could be fun. It could be all right.
Right, and he'll give you a root canal for a pint of blood. So there you go. Gregory England at Oregon Brood chimes in for you, Matt. Thoughts on Cutler for the rest of the year? We went over the schedule for Detroit here. Now you look at Jay Cutler, and we've seen disaster. We've seen all sorts of stories for Cutler this season. You've got Tampa in the McCown Custody Bowl, then Detroit, Dallas, New Orleans, and Detroit again in the championship week there. So thoughts on Cutler the rest of the season in your eyes, Matt?
Well, it would probably apply to the same thing when Bloom asked me about Mr. Russell Wilson and whether I was hot or cold with him. And I would say, as some folks were laughing about last night, is that it would be like if you were taking a shower and your spouse flushes the toilet and the shower gets really hot or really cold, and I'd say Detroit is basically that kind of situation as his matchup twice at the end of the season here. But as someone who has Cutler in one of our leagues, and I know that Bloom and I are in, is a Reality Sports Online league. I've got to ride or die with him or Teddy Bridgewater, and you'll know I'll be riding or dying with Cutler at this stage of the game just because of the weapons that he has. I look at it as Cutler is capable of delivering great play for you or inspired play for you any week, but at any moment, we all know that he can basically be, a lead balloon for you too in fantasy football. So you just have to hope that this team is healthy enough, and if it is, he gives you a puncher's chance. And if you're in a league that you don't get penalized for interceptions, then it really doesn't matter, because it's very rare that he goes that he ends up giving you 150-yard efforts. It's more likely he gives you 270 to 350-yard efforts with 5 interceptions, but the yardage should help you out okay. So his ceiling's pretty high, as long as you're not in a league that penalizes you egregiously for interceptions.
You're watching Andy Reid, and no, that is not a menu he's putting up in front of his face. That is the one sheet for coaches to call plays, and at least it's larger, much, of course with Andy it's larger, than Dan Reeves' one sheet, which his playbook was run, punt. It kind of looked like this.
Nice.
He's going like this. That's what Dan Reeves would be doing, because his little one sheet to run. This one says we should run. Let's run this time. We got the game going on.
Yeah.
About ready to wrap up here. Bloom, what are your thoughts here? Who's going to come out on top?
I mean, it's asking Alex Smith to go 50 yards with no timeouts. It's still, I know, again, he's pulled off. Someone reminded me that he had 10 fourth-quarter comebacks with San Francisco. We just have a Travis Kelce drop, it looks like. Now, it saved them a little bit of time. There was a fourth down. There was a defensive penalty. So resetting it here, I think it's second down. Well, they're reviewing this catch here. It's second down or third down and 4 if this is upheld as an incompletion. No timeouts, 49 seconds left. The problem here is this is a Chiefs team that has not completed a touchdown pass to a wide receiver this year. And you got to have some sort of downfield element. Sure, I mean, Kelce, even if he catches this ball, it would have been in the middle of the field, and you're no timeouts, the clock's going to be running. So I don't want to bloom the Raiders, but I mean, I think this is like, a 1% chance for Alex Smith to do this. This offense is just not designed to come back to win.
Raiders fan.
Yeah.
Raiders fan.
Zook right there, of course, man. You got it's got the colors already.
Silver and black. There you go.
There you go, Matt. Takeaways from this game as the game is about ready to wrap up here.
I'm just sick and tired of Alex Smith. I mean, he's certainly a player that is competent for you, but the fact that Aaron Murray threw the longest pass to Travis Kelce this season, it was in the preseason. They're just wasting the talent of a dimension of a talented player by just keeping him on short routes and making him have to work through like umpteenth guys to be able to get down the field. That's just not a way to use this guy. So, I mean, I think he's a stopgap option. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, a player, in the likes of Brett Hundley or Marcus Mariota or somebody like that, the Chiefs try to find a way to finagle their way to get somebody who can reprise a young Donovan McNabb in some way, shape, or form. Or at least that's my fantasy for the Chiefs if I were like a Chiefs fan. I think everybody who's a major football fan looks at this, and that's what you hope to see. In terms of, Jamal Charles still doing his thing, certainly looks very good. I continue to be a little more impressed with Derek Carr than I have been pre-draft. He's showing, more often than not, he's showing up, with plays that are not difficult pocket plays, difficult pocket pressure. He still has some issues with, but he's not just completely folding it up whenever he gets pressured. So you got to like that. But these teams to me are almost mirror images of each other. Yeah, we got a sack to end the game pretty much here, or it looks like it's going to end the game. And Yep, number 55. There you go, Mr. C.L. Moore.
C.L. Moore.
Yeah. And now the
line of scrimmage. That's so funny. They're celebrating in
back to the line of scrimmage. They're like 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage, high-fiving each other and doing a dance.
That's Mac and C.O. Moore, two great players.
Yeah,
Man.
Two exciting defenders to watch, that's for sure.
These
What's
teams
to confer here? It's a flag. Why are they doing that? Like, the ball was reset. They can snap it. It's wise of Kansas City to do that.
They were saying they called a timeout, I think, maybe.
That's what Justin Tuck is saying. Yeah, they timeout. Timeout Raiders.
You know, and that's where the veterans, and listen, I gave Oakland a ton of shut your mouth for, hey, we're going to get a bunch of old guys, but if it is Justin Tuck sitting there going like that,
a couple of rings,
he sees his teammates back there celebrating, and Justin Tuck's like this, good on you, old man. That's what this team needed. There he is. Yeah, you see him doing the timeout. Love the face mask, by the way.
Face mask in the entire NFL.
Can't eat any Subway with that, though.
No.
Hands down. So, Raiders, maybe some big-time celebrations going on here. As we wrap up tonight's show, of course, we're going to be off next week for Thanksgiving. And a tradition in my family is we go around the table at Thanksgiving before we eat, and we just say what we're thankful for. So, a tradition on the Audible here. We'll go around and just say what we're thankful for as we also watch this game wrap up. I'm thankful for my family, thankful for the ability to cover football for a living and have so much support at home that allows me to travel, follow this game, and be away from home and cover this game that I love. Thankful for my friendships, my brothers, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Dr. Gene Bramall, our football guys staff. Thankful to Joe and David for putting together this site years ago and how we've come together and really had a lot of fun on this program. Thankful for the audience. As we often say, your love and energy drives us. Without you, there is no us. Like, we'd be talking on the phone, but we wouldn't be doing this show. So thank you very much for all of that. And as we watch Alex Smith walk away in disgust, Bloom, your thoughts and what you're thankful for.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we always echo the sentiment of being thankful for the audience, not taking this for granted. And knowing that it's because of the audience that we can do this. So all of you out there, and in addition, all the things that you add to our lives, and this is something that I've tried to say more often on the show, and I'll say it again right now. You're letting us into your life. You're letting us into your head. I think that's kind of a sacred thing, and I hope that we can continue to make that a choice that you're happy with. And we're accompanying each other, even though it's a more of a remote. It's funny. I saw a quote from Nikola Tesla about how he basically predicted everything that we're living in right now, and how the wireless world would allow people to be with each other hundreds or thousands of miles away, and you'd be able to, like, you're attending an event live, even though you're nowhere near it, and it would make distance very meaningless. And I think the distance between all of us out there, as we're answering people's questions on Twitter, as people are laughing along with us as we're wiping the tears from our eyes and things like that, that's real. That connection between all of us is very real, and I'm very thankful for that. It fuels me, and I hope that I could give some of that back to people. And just thankful. Cease, I'll just sum it up like this. I don't want to have any sorry Joe moments. I'm thankful that there are so many people over the years that continue to put up with my ish. And allow me, that this universe continues to allow me to be me, and I appreciate that. And I think that the last thing I'll say that I'm thankful for as I think about this, and this is something I said on Facebook the other day, is I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful that I'm getting the opportunity to be a parent and experience that flow of love between a parent and a child. Just to be part of that is one of the most remarkable, extraordinary things. Any moment of it, pick out any moment of it. Just when things that are ordinary, everyday things are extraordinary. And I'm definitely thankful for what my son brings into my life. And I think that as parents, I remember, I don't want to start, this is like me lying down on the couch, but you hear like unconditional love, parents. This is like when you're messing up when you're a teenager, we've got unconditional love no matter what. But really, I think kids teach parents about unconditional love. So I'm happy and thankful for that lesson.
Messing up when you're a teenager, hell, when you're 30. Not speaking from personal experience.
Yeah.
Matt, what are you thankful for here, brother?
It's a long list to mention, so I won't go through all of them, and I'll save some of those for the dinner time when we do the exact same thing, Cecil. But I will say first and foremost, my wife and daughter, who are just, absolutely unbelievable and supportive, and hopefully I'm as supportive to them as they are to me, and especially, I'm just thankful to have a 22-year-old daughter who could whip Kean O'Fatty in some fantasy football. Make him cry.
It always comes back to who could whip Kean.
Yeah, well,
always comes back to that.
One-handed probably, but that's another thing. So we'll get into that another time. But Kean's all good. I'm thankful for guys like Kean who I can bust on, and he can bust on me back and not take it personally, and we have a good time with it. And certainly, I can go on about all the people who listen, but I'm going to focus specifically on those of you who take the time and effort to email me and to talk about things that are tangential to football, or to talk about something that's going on personally, and to establish that type of connection that's a little bit more of a personal connection through what we've learned in football. I mean, I've met people from all around the world through email, through the connection that we have of fantasy football or just football and the draft, folks who travel around the world and just live off of taking photos, to people who are in all walks of life, and to be able to get books and music and photography and things like that from people, just because we made a connection over, something like football, really means a lot. I mean, I have a beautiful photo hanging on my wall right now from a guy by the name of Adrian Landon, who he and his girlfriend have been traveling all over Southeast Asia for years, and that's, just from him emailing me from, Thailand late at night about his fantasy league, and that's just an unbelievable thing. And some folks who even no longer play fantasy football, but just continue to keep up, and we trade YouTube videos or things like that. So the connections like that are really meaningful to me. Obviously, anybody who has been a rabid fan of the RSP and it can't wait for me to go for a pre-sale of something that I don't even give out early, but will willingly buy something in January that doesn't come out until April, and they're as rabid about it as a bunch of mamas outside of a Walmart on Black Friday. I mean, it's just that's the kind of, I'm unbelievably thankful for that, because the first time I did the RSP was, 10 years ago, and I probably could have done a few loads of laundry and taken somebody out to eat, the first time I did that. And because of, and that includes the two of you having me on the show for the first time when I was with a different site, and liking what I did, and the friendship that we've developed over the years, and the work that we've done is just fantastic. I cherish it, and and just for the fact that more than anything, and I hope everyone else feels this way, is just that you're alive and that you're living in this time. That's something to be extremely thankful for every day, because it can turn in a minute. And I've certainly, I won't go into it, but other than that, someone who I hired about 5 or 6 years ago at a company, I saw their life take a turn for the worse in a way that was, very sad to see, and it was due to illness and some other factors. And you just never know; it's never guaranteed. So it's really worthwhile to be able to cherish what you have, and it's not. It seems cliche, but it really isn't.
We said thanks to everyone out there. I also want to throw in a special Veterans Day thanks as well to the men and women of our armed forces who also email us from Japan or wherever they're stationed across this world, saying, "Hey, love the show. Watch in the middle of the morning." So thank you guys. Thank you everyone out there for listening to the show. You can follow Sigmund Bloom on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. Matt Waldman is at Matt Waldman. I'm at Cecil Lammy, and the show is at The Audible, because we keep it at simple, baby. We thank you all. Have a safe and happy holiday season. We'll be back on December 4th, I believe it is off the top of my head, and we'll be talking about football again. So, as always, stay tuned and stay frosty.